Welcome to Return on Intuition, the podcast where strategy meets soul. I'm Erin McMahon, a marketing leader, startup advisor, mom of two, and lifelong seeker of what's real. In a world ruled by data, speed, and artificial intelligence, there is a space where we pause to tune in. Each week, we'll explore what it means to lead, build, parent, and grow, not just with logic, but with intuition. You'll hear from founders, creators, marketers, spiritual guides, and so many more. People aligning ambition with purpose and using their intuition as a real tool for transformation. Because when we pay attention, get present, and trust our instincts, that's when the magic happens. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to Return on Intuition. Today I want to talk about seasons and changes and what that means for our intuition and how we can adapt to it. It's late August, and even in North Carolina, a very warm part of the world, the weather's a little bit cooler and the leaves are starting to change just a little bit, and that has me thinking about fall. And with fall comes back to school, even though my kids are in daycare, so they get year-round school. There's no back to them. That's just continuing. Although they do officially start the new year, and then also, sports seasons are starting back up again. I am a big basketball and football fan. More so basketball than football. I don't know all the rules in football, but I am so inspired by the game and love watching and going to games and learning about the challenges of the players and everything behind the scenes. So all that connects with me. It's a very emotional time of year, and we recently had a lot of birthdays, and my family and my son's birthday is coming up on August 31st. So, that transition is significant too, because that marks not only his fourth birthday, but the time I became a mother. And, for kids' birthdays now, and for a while, I've always gone, happy birthday to whomever the kid is. But then, for my close friends, if I knew that birthday was also when it made them a mother, it's, like happy motherhood to you. It's, it'll be 4 years of motherhood for me. So that's a significant day too. And so within the framework of fall, it's somewhat of a comforting feeling, the familiar feeling of going back to school, the familiar feeling of seasons changing. And it's an interesting juxtaposition to intuition and what we talked about last week, which was like, notice the change, notice what's going on around your outside, but also, reflect internally and focus on what your intuition is saying, which is coming from within. And, that's not necessarily reflective of outside experiences. And it's an interesting contrast, because what's happening outside is exciting and familiar, and I don't think it should be ignored. And in fact, I'm, embracing and savoring like every little change I'm seeing, just because I know that I love the idea of, it being fall sports season and, the leaves changing and all the fun holidays coming up. And so I'm getting very excited about that. And I thought, what does that mean, as it relates to listening to my inner voice or focusing internally? And I think both are key to do in balance. And what the external changing environment can do is it can help you remember what is true to you and what activates and lights you up, and you can use that as guidance that is coming internally. So what's happening externally, don't be restrictively following that, but use what is exciting to you and what calls to you to then connect internally and see what that means for you going forward. As seasons change, I think about growth, I think about development, and obviously the school year relates to that too, because part of going to school is learning and growing. And while I'm not going to a full-time school right now, This is obviously the school of life. I'm a lifelong learner, so certainly thinking to myself, what goals do I have over the next, few months, year, that sort of thing? What do I want to learn? I did actually recently enroll in Kundalini yoga teacher training, so I'm very excited about that because Kundalini yoga has changed my life since I started, which was shortly after I gave birth to my second child, Katie. It was in very early postpartum, literally like days, I want to say, and I couldn't do my normal cardio routine. And I just came upon this podcast about Kundalini yoga and decided to start. It's very gentle movements, focused on breathing, focused on movement that has an energetic meaning. So I started it and I literally haven't stopped, and it's been absolutely life changing. So I'm excited to embrace this journey at the next level. And so that's sort of my my back to school now. I actually got a few books about it. And that was great for just learning more about the energetics behind it and then the different movements so I can build. If you are following along on this journey and want want an online class, I will be learning all about that. So please let me know if you're interested because there will be lots of rookie, um, maybe not the best, most well-trained sessions, but they will be in development, and I am excited to share what I learn. So that's a segment aside, but maybe I was unknowingly influenced by the fall of, this back to school season and saying like I'm ready for something more in terms of what what I want to learn and also what I'm ready to give to the world. I've told a lot of people that in my circles that I love Kundalini yoga, but I haven't really been able to offer an outlet for it or um, you know, give more information. And then when I attend classes, I'm always like, I want to know more. I want to know more. So anyway, that's that side of things. I mentioned sports and my love for sports. It comes in two forms for me. Number one, when I was in school, I did cross country and track, and going back to school always meant, the start of a cross country season, and me focused on getting faster and being the best, and excelling and being a leader on my team. And that was always full of anticipation and I like the excitement of it, but I was very intimidated and mind oriented as it came to the competition. So I would find myself being fast when I would go on practice rides and when I could, leave my mind out of it. But I've certainly had races where I was very mind focused and froze up. And then after I stopped competing in high school, and I didn't compete in college, but I literally had some of my fastest times in running longer distances, half marathons, and the like, because I didn't put that internal mental pressure on myself to do the best and like literally push my mind. And I think that it's such a key analogy for um for life and everything else. And one that I'm learning over time to, not put as much push and focus on it because that can constrict overall development and growth. And again, that's maybe that was a function of obviously it's something I wanted internally to grow, achieve, win, be the best. But then that forcing function of doing it and then thinking about, everyone else, external expectations, that sort of thing, that I think constricted my overall performance and growth, which is why, afterwards when those restrictions were off, I saw more success. Like I was faster. I, it's honestly, crazy. And I'm sure my high school self would have been like, oh my gosh, what in the world? Why did this show up now when I really wanted it, and could show results to, potentially running in college if I wanted to do that. So anyway, that's side one of sports that I, always think about. Also running in the fall is absolutely dreamy. It's just an amazing time with the leaves changing and everything like that. So definitely if you're into casually running at all, I would suggest the fall is a good time to remember that. And then number two, team sports. So team sports, I became a fan of watching sports and like literally a super fan, more extracting, more meaning from it. I would say starting in eighth grade when my dad took me to a Duke basketball game. That's when I first saw, a team that Duke basketball and college has always been very good and led by a world famous coach, Mike Krzyzewski, more famous in the U.S., but he's won Olympic gold medals, so I'll say world famous. And, I started watching it as just a game, but the more I follow the team, I listened to what Coach K said, and, he didn't say things necessarily just about the sport, just about, logistics and passing the ball and scoring or whatever, but he was, said things that were very much spiritual, mental, really connected to things of greater meaning that could apply outside of sports. He wrote one of his first books, maybe his first book was called Lead with the Heart. It's one of my favorite books that I've read, and it really talks about something that is the basis of this podcast, which is leading from your intuition, or, as he says, lead with your heart. So that is not going mental, but really thinking about what your inner wisdom is calling to you. And I think, one of the things he talks about is playing not to lose, but playing to win, and really focusing on, discipline, focusing on your teammates, how you're going about things, thinking about emotional intelligence, and trusting your own internal instincts and not other externalities. And the part of the reason why that was key for him and key for his teams is because there's so much external pressure, expectations, which, part of that is the fans' expectations, which I certainly have on the team, but, not giving into those external expectations and really focusing on, internal development, what you want to need, and things like that. There's one player that was in my class at Duke, JJ Redick, who, went through a period of, I mean, first of all, he was, one of the top players in the country. There's a lot of expectations on him coming in. He was really good coming in, but everybody was, going either hated him, wanted to, attack him on and off the court, a combination of both, in terms of because he was so good, and that it did seem to get to him to some extent, in terms of, there were games where his performance wasn't as great, and there were times and he went through a period of, mental uncertainty and being lost a bit. And, he talked about this with Coach K on his podcast, on one of their podcasts. JJ used to have a podcast before he became head coach of the Lakers. And Coach K talked to him about how, he needed a bridge to get from one side of where he was going to the next. And as a 20-year-old, he didn't necessarily have the skills to, get over that bridge. And that was the role of, a coach and a leader to help him recognize that there is a bridge. People have been here before. And here's how you get from one side to the other side. And I think that's important in terms of development, setting goals, and actually feeling the rhythm of the seasons, because it allows you to reflect on where you were and where you want to go. So even though, when we were 20, those things may not have been as apparent, but as we've been through more falls and we see where we want to go, the fall, the back to school season, it's a good time to remember that there are bridges, there are seasons, there are times when we were one place and we made it and developed to another place. Get a little bit emotional thinking about that because it can be scary going over bridges, but it can lead to better places. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And the others have been where you want to go, and you can go over those bridges. So on top of that, outside of basketball, I recently read a book called Inner Tennis, or I think it's not quite inner tennis, but it's like the inner game of tennis. And the reason why I read it is because there's a podcast by Duke basketball, one former Duke basketball player who, if you know me at all, you know he's my favorite basketball player of all time, Shane Battier. He graduated in 2001. Was on the team when I first watched them in middle school, and like the fact that he has a podcast in 2024 is my 16-year-old like dream, because I always wanted to hear what he had to say as a 21-year-old, because I thought he was the smartest guys on the team. He was very much like goal oriented, wanted to go places, thought more about, talked about more than just the games and the X and the O's at like at a very young age. And so I was inspired by that as a 16-year-old. So now he has a podcast with one of his best friends who is a tech entrepreneur and now is a partner in Sequoia. And then Alex Smith, who used to play for the 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I love this podcast because it talks about business and sports and, all aspects of it, mental, spiritual, logistical, talks about teams. It's called Glue Guys because they say, and I agree, that there's important people on the team, not just the CEOs who were, running the business, or the players on teams that are scoring the points, but, the people who are the unspoken heroes who are passing the ball and things like that. And that's really the player that Shane Battier was in college, and in the pros, he made other players better. In the pros, he was on the Miami Heat team with winning two NBA championships, and that team had LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and he helped them elevate them to the championships. He famously would always guard Kobe, and he would analyze how Kobe performed on the court and make sure he would, get him into situations and places on the court where he performed the least, so he would have a more of a minimal impact on the game. So anyway, this podcast, amazing. Talked about a book called Inner Tennis when they were talking to head coach of the Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr. I never heard of this book. They were talking about Phil Jackson in that case, and Steve Kerr was given this book by Phil Jackson while he was on the Chicago Bulls. I had no idea that Phil Jackson was so philosophical and was sort of ahead of his time in terms of really making sure his players were understanding the mental game. But there it is. This is why I love podcasts, for everything I learned. So I, of course, being the dedicated learner that I am, and also just obsessed with podcasts and learning more, definitely immediately downloaded the Inner Game and thought it was amazing. And some key points, which I wrote down, I want to review. The Inner Game of tennis talked about two key things, self one and self two. And the coach was a tennis coach in various places, and he identified two selves. Self one is your inner critic, the voice that's constantly instructing and judging you, and self two, which is your Natural intelligence sounds kind of like the inner voice. The part that you already know, that already knows how to learn, adapt, and perform. And he noted in his coaching that depending on how he would communicate with people about their, tennis performance, or what kind of pressure they were under, whether they were in a group coaching situation or things like that, but it would really literally make a huge difference on how they were engaging and how they would adjust to playing. And the whole thesis is that most of our struggles aren't necessarily about lack of skill or knowledge. They're about your inner critic and how it's blocking, in his case, calling it the natural intelligence ability to respond. Now, in this case, the natural intelligence, you're literally taking that's literally removing your thinking, and in sport that's so much more important, so you can react based on instinct. And the more you can do that, the better that you can perform and adapt. And I would say, I suppose from a running perspective, like literally me removing my inner critic when I got faster was like, doesn't matter if you're going fast or slow, you're just going. And that just let my body do its thing. And I think in the case of tennis and other sports, certainly, if you're put in the place of thinking about what you need to do, you're removing that natural ability to respond. And the amazing thing is, or the amazing thing to me is still, relying on my mindset, is that when you remove your mind, your body can respond and do amazing things. And I mean, that's another reason why I absolutely love sports, because it's seeing that in another person and seeing someone develop that is amazing and magical. And then you can you can make that apply in all sorts of situations in professional life, or as it relates to creativity. I think it's really important, because the more mental pressure you're putting on yourself, the less you're letting those ideas come to you. However you think they may come to you. Some, creatives like Elizabeth Gilbert say the ideas aren't hers. They are kind of channeled to her and through her. And, that's how it comes about. Bruce Springsteen, as an artist, says that the idea is like he'll have sessions and he calls it like drilling. He's just like drilling and things. At one point he'll hit some oil, and then he'll get like, these inspired lyrics and messages, and it'll turn into his greatest hits. But he's also recognizing in that observation of how it works, that the effort is certainly there, but it is those moments of, looking, allowing, that then can cause inspiration to strike. So I think that it was a great audio read. I need to read it again, but I was absolutely inspired by it. The more that you, and how it relates to your inner voice and your return on intuition, if we can make a parallel between this self to your natural intelligence, whether you think that that's the same pathway or a different pathway, the more that you can trust, allow your mind to take a back seat, the better that intuition, or those instincts have a voice. And it's hard because your mind's in there, your ego's in there. You want to put the effort in and feel like you have control, but the more you let go, the more you can trust the process, that you can access something that is greater than what you really imagine. So I think those are the key things as it relates to intuition and sport. I've deviated a bit from the fall intro to this, but I think the key things are your season come in cycles. They remind us of what is familiar. They remind us of where we've been and where we could go if we want to go somewhere. Identify, I think the key thing to do, and what I'm thinking about, is identify where I've been, where I want to go, and where I am right now and how I get there. Thinking more big picture allows me to focus and prioritize things that are important, not just what I can get done and then what I will get immediate external validation for. Honor your ego, and what your mind wants to do, and doing that allows it to be satisfied to some extent, but then also what I've been saying is, let that side take a rest. And remember, as I read like many years ago, lead with heart, intuition. Remember what that inner calling is that you want to do, and figure out how you can get there. And then, in the middle of all that, you're also showing up for the magic, whether that be what's happening internally, that inner voice inside you, but then also thinking about, the cycles of the seasons and honoring where you have been, and where you are now, even though sometimes that's hard because you have a picture of where you want to go. Honoring both of those things. I was at my parents the other day and I saw a picture of my middle school self, and I was like, obviously, like, or maybe it was early high school self, and I was like, ugh, I was awkward, and I don't know, like, just didn't have the right haircut and things like that. And, what was my fashion style? What was I thinking then? And I mean, these are the immediate, things that come up in my mind. But I'm like, also, that girl had a lot of drive and she had a lot of dreams. And it's important to remember who she was there too. So honor that part of yourself, and also, the things that you've been through, and where you want to go. And that can help you, give you strength for going where you want to go next. So, call to action this week, ideally, I want to notice where I'm trying to control outcomes instead of trusting the process, and trusting that process, listening to that calm center that says, chill out. Where could I benefit from a little more heart-led leadership in my life? And hopefully, if that inspires you, you can do the same. And hopefully, in doing so, we can reflect a bit more and appreciate the season of fall, where we've gone, where we want to go, as we go back to the school of life, in this case, the school of intuition, and strengthening intuition. And I will talk to you next time. Have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for tuning in to Return on Intuition. If something sparked your curiosity or lit you up, I'd love to hear from you. Share the episode, leave a review, or DM me with what landed. Your feedback helps shape where we go next. And remember, the best decisions don't just come from what you know, they come from what you feel. So take a breath, trust yourself, and keep following the moments that feel like magic. I'll see you next time.